What is up, and welcome to episode 10 of the Bruin Bible. Will Decker here with special guest Jake Crain from the J-Boys Show, one of the better college football shows around. We're lucky to have him to break down arguably the biggest game of the Bruin season, talk a little SEC football, and all of that coming up for opening weekend in college football. Jake, we got to start with the big game on the schedule, UCLA, LSU, SEC coming to Pasadena for a big game at the Rose Bowl. First game of the season for LSU. UCLA luckily had a game under their belt last week where they looked really good, but granted it was against Hawaii. Give me your thoughts on LSU coming into this year, because they had a little bit of a rough season last year, 5-5, new offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, and a lot of talent to go with it. So what's going on with the Tigers and LSU?
Man, last year was such a crazy year with COVID. The amount of opt-outs that LSU had, and everybody had to go through it, so it's not an excuse. But, I look at this team. I think offensively, Max Johnson was the right guy. And when you look at what LSU, really what their strength is and what Ed Orgeron's strength, he's a great motivator. Edo's not going to sit here and just schematically, pants people all the time. But what you're going to get is a team that's hungry, a team that's pissed off, a team that's had to be displaced because of a hurricane. And the only normal thing that they're going to really have experienced the past couple of weeks is being able to go out there and actually play a game. And LSU's going to travel, I promise you. There'll probably be more LSU fans in the stands than UCLA. They're pissed off, they're talented, and that's a dangerous combination. But it should be a good game. And kudos to UCLA for taking this game.
Yeah, I mean, the Bruins, they want to play some of the better competition this year. And from what we saw opening week, the defense was flying around for the football, which is a new sign there. Jerry Azzinaro, defensive coordinator for the Bruins, has been really inconsistent there, mostly on the bad side of things. Defense looked good. They were flying to the football, and it was led by former Alabama linebacker A.L. Cahow coming around, making a sack, blocking a punt down there. Going back to LSU, there's this guy that stood out to me, and I think to any LSU fan in general, Kayshon Boutte, the wide receiver there, long lineage of wideouts coming from the Tigers. I thought this was a typo, Jake. 14 catch, 308-yard game with 3 touchdowns against Ole Miss. I mean, that's got to be one of the craziest games in SEC history from a wideout. This guy is talented, and like you mentioned, Max Johnson, Brad Johnson's son, former Super Bowl quarterback winner, over 1,000 yards through the air last year, 8 touchdowns. The lefty shows he can spin it. Tell me a little bit about Boutte and maybe some of the other skill position players on offense.
Yeah, well, Boutte really came on. He had that incredible game, but he put a couple good games together, and they lost, a ton with Jamar Chase and Terrace Marshall and those guys. But LSU is recruited so well. They can make up for it very easily. Now, they got a bunch of young guys. Their running back rotation is a little bit skewed. They're still trying to find those guys, but they're talented. And look, this all revolves around Max Johnson, though. But the biggest question for LSU is the offensive line. You can have the best receivers, you can have great running backs and quarterbacks, but LSU lost their starting. That was going to be their starting left tackle, Dare Rosenthal. He transferred to Kentucky during the transfer portal madness. So that's what they're waiting to see. They'll never have a lack of athletes, whether it's running back, like I said, wide receiver, doesn't matter. But if they are good up front and they're able to protect Max Johnson, because Jake Pete's this new OC, you're going to get your zone read. You're going to get your RPO. They're going to spread you out. This isn't going to be Les Miles or Steven Sminger just trying to run it through the A and B gap. So keep an eye out on the offensive line. That's something I would really watch.
Jake Pete's a disciple of Joe Brady, too, the offensive coordinator that led them on their 2019 national championship run, had the connection with Burrow that, sprouted them up to the number 1 pick. Defensive side of the ball was a weird thing for LSU last year because we're usually, accustomed to these LSU defenses that are some of the best in the country. Defense last year, they ranked 124th in total defense last year. That is one of the craziest stats you'd ever see from an LSU team, especially when you look at some of the talent they had on the ball. I mean, Derek Stingley is on everyone's draft board in the top 5. That guy's going to be a stud. I know, and Eli Ricks may have gotten burned a couple times, but 4 interceptions, 2 returned for touchdowns. he's a really quality corner too when he makes some plays. New coordinator in there, Durante Jones, coming from the NFL, another coordinator with NFL background. How does the defense right the ship in 2021? Because it was miserable in 2020.
Yeah, when you look at LSU, again, and I'll say this again, I say this on the show all the time. It's funny. You think about LSU, and the first thing I always think about is defense. Seeing the freaks they have running around in the secondary and the guys they have on the defensive line. And it's not that they weren't talented last year, but they didn't really play as a team. And Bo Pelini was not a good fit. You could tell that from the jump. The Mississippi State game, they stayed in man the whole time against an air raid offense, which is basically like drinking EPCAC and trying not to throw up. So when you look at the team now, they're very deep on the defensive line. You'll have people talk about Ali Gay and his injuries and stuff like that. I think he's ready. They've got a ton of young, talented defensive linemen. Mason Smith, already looks like an adult. He's about 6'5", 310. Not a lot of fat on him, a guy that's going to play early. But that's secondary. You got Stingley and Ricks on both sides. Major Burns transfers in, which may be the most unfortunate name for a DB in the history of football, but hell, it is what it is. And I think they're pissed off. And nothing motivates an 18 to 22-year-old more than being embarrassed in front of your friends. And that's what happened last year to LSU and their defense. Now, we'll see with Durante calling it. It's going to be interesting. He hasn't really done a lot of that. But I think they're talented enough where if they mix it up and just let the kids play, they should be fine.
Also got Mike Jones, the transfer from Clemson, coming in at linebacker. Mike Jones?
Who? Yep, there we go. I was wondering. Sorry, there's no way I cannot use that joke when that name.
Oh man, 281-330-8004, man.
Look at him. Look at Will Flexen.
Big Mike Jones guy back in the day, my guy.
I love it.
But yeah, I want to kind of hear also your take on the Bruins, my man. It is not an SEC team. Pac-12 has not been anything close to a powerhouse conference in the past few years. I think this Bruins team has a chance to win 8 or 9 games this year. I think the running game is special. They've got Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who, granted, played inconsistently in the first game, but he has a ceiling where he could be a guy that is a game changer at the quarterback position. Tell me what your thoughts are on UCLA.
Yeah, I think it all revolves around, Dorian's decision-making. I thought he was a little bit tentative in some areas last week. Now, he had some drops. We all saw that. But he also had an underthrow that the receiver cut underneath the DB and caught for a touchdown. Ricks or Stingley's picking that off. And he has all the talent in the world. The biggest thing for him is just not trying to do too much. And I say this all the time. There's nothing wrong with throwing the check down. There's nothing wrong with 2nd and 6. It's you just can't get really greedy. He's got to make sure, too, when he does take off, he's protecting the ball. But with Chip Kelly, coaching the offense, I don't worry about UCLA being able to get put in the right position and make the right play call. I don't think they can afford a lot of injuries on the offensive side of the ball, especially on the offensive line. Not many people can, but I think they have a chance to make some noise in the Pac-12 this year. Again, you look at Oregon, you look at USC, Arizona State, people can say what they want. But I think UCLA has a defense that has a chance to be pretty good in the Pac-12. If they can continue to rush the passer and just be very active. It looked like they were running around like when they stole their first pack of cigarettes. That's what they were moving like during the game. So if they can do that, I think they'll have a chance to have a pretty good year.
I agree with that, man. I want to hear your prediction on LSU UCLA, and then we could dive into some talk about SEC football. Who you got taking it on Saturday at the Rose Bowl, and what's the score?
Yeah, I'm gonna go and listen. UCLA fans, I'm sorry, but the one thing is I'm not gonna lie. I like LSU. 38-24.
I think that's a reasonable prediction. This is a team that, for all its struggles last year, coming off of a national championship 2 years ago, like you said, they were embarrassed last year. They're ready to get this in the rearview mirror and get back to their winning ways. I'm going to go with 42-34. I think UCLA is going to maybe get a late touchdown at the end. It's not going to be as close as that score, but the run game for them was Charbonnet and Brown and the 5 returning offensive linemen. I really think that's going to be a huge thing that they're going to be able to do in the game on Saturday. Let's touch base on some SEC football. Alabama, preseason to take it once again. And they lost so much talent. It's literally nuts. You lose with Mac Jones, Waddle, Devonta Smith, Leatherwood on the offense. And, Saban just does this every year, just picks in guys and plugs them into new options. Yeah. And they just ball out. Bryce Young is the new guy who's going to be starting for them. Big Josh Mechie guy. That's the guy who did a hell of a job at wideout for them.
Yeah.
Give me kind of your assessment of Bama on the offensive side of the football.
Well, when I look at Alabama, you talk about Nick Saban. He turned it into a machine because they don't recruit; they draft. They're not like, oh, well, we got to. No, we're going to pick him. We're going to pick him. We're going to pick him, and they're all going to early enroll. I think the offensive side, Bryce Young is very talented. I think they're going to slow play him a little bit in the Miami game because they should dominate up front. There's no reason to put too much on that kid's plate early, even though he has had a little experience and was able to go through an actual spring and a summer. Sorry, it's a little bit loud. SEC Nation's literally right to the right of me by where our studio is. But Tebow's literally 15 feet behind me to my left. But I don't have to worry about him blocking me at tight end. So, when I look at what else Alabama has, they've got a ton of young skill players at the wide receiver position. The Jai kid, they're making comparisons to Julio from a size, frame, and movement standpoint, which is horrifying for everybody else in college football. We all know how good Robinson is at running back. You watch Roydell Williams, the guy that has one of the best names in college football. I mean, they're just loaded there. But I'm going to give you a name on offense to remember because they'll talk about Mechie, they'll talk about Billingsley, they'll talk about Robinson, they'll talk about Trey Sanders. Cameron Latu, the tight end. I think he has a huge game against Miami, and I think he has a chance to be a very, very special player, and he is a matchup nightmare because he is one of the few players that can block in line and be effective and flex out and be effective in the passing game.
Man, if you could do both, that's some Gronkowski level stuff there at the tight end position.
It's like finding a nickel that can cover the slot and man and be good against the run.
Man, well, Latu, believe me, his stock has risen just from this conversation. Defensive side of the ball, they lose a lot of talent too. Barmore is gone. Dylan Moses was a staple there. Patrick Surtain, top 10 pick in the draft. But like you said, Saban, it's a machine. Who are some of the defensive standouts you see for Alabama this year if they want to repeat as SEC champs?
Yeah, you got to start with Will Anderson. I mean, he's a freak show coming off the edge. A guy that plays backer, that can really play in jack. Think of him kind of like Courtney Upshaw, but he's better in coverage. They just released a stat that he's got up to 20 miles per hour running around in practice, which basically makes him a nuclear missile at his size. He's not a little guy either. Josh Jobe in the back end is super talented. I mean, look, they're all really good. It's just who are the guys that are going to be top 5 pick good. I think Will Anderson, who was only a true sophomore, by the way, he was a true freshman last year, so he's not even eligible for the draft. I think he's going to be their best player. And what you're going to see Alabama do is rotate a ton on the defensive line. And that's something that the best teams are able to do. And this Alabama defense, I think, will remind a lot of people of the old Alabama defenses under Nick Saban.
I love it. And I want to get your prediction before they play. Do you think they repeat as SEC champs? A lot of turnovers we mentioned, but it is Saban we're talking about here.
I do not. I got Georgia winning the SEC.
Ooh, I love it, man. That's actually the next team we're going to roll right into. So I want to talk about Georgia and the Dogs playing Clemson tomorrow, which should be the highlight of the weekend for any fan. We got the three-headed monster of JT Daniels, Zamir White, and Jackson at wideouts. Mm-hmm. What makes that group special to you, and what makes them better than the Giants?
Well, and look, they've had attrition. You look at Pickens going down, Arik Gilbert having his deal off the field. Darnell Washington's beat up. Kearis Jackson's a little beat up. Blaylock's coming off an ACL, but they still got cats. I mean, they got cats running all over the place. I think some of those guys are going to be healthy. When I look at their offensive line, Matt Luke, to me, is one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. And I think Kirby actually trusts Todd Monken and JT Daniels to open up the offense a little bit. I call it the Nick Saban epiphany, realizing that, you're not going to be able to just play 3 yards of cloud of dust, stop people on defense, and play good special teams and win 17-3 anymore. Teams are able to score. So I just look at their roster. I think it's one of the best rosters they've had. They made some huge additions to the secondary and the transfer portal. I mean, hell, one from Clemson, one of the teams they're playing, Darion Kendrick. And I look at this Clemson game, and if Clemson's going to rotate centers, it's going to be a problem.
Totally see that. They got some good stuff on D too. The front seven is something to watch out for.
Yeah, Jordan Davis is a monster.
They've got some guys, man. And, Kirby Smart, this might be the year they finally get over the hump, playing Bama potentially in that SEC title game. One of the teams that is kind of the sleeping giant of the SEC, which is crazy to say because it is the most competitive league in all of the country. Texas A&M has got some monsters on that team. Some monsters. When we're talking about top 20 picks, Kenyon Green could be there. You know what I mean? They may have the best running back in the conference this year in Isaiah Spiller. You know, they've got just different guys all around on the field that are very, very impressive. What do you think about Texas A&M? I know they have a potential new quarterback in King who will be starting for them this year, but a lot of monsters on that team.
There is. I mean, I like the Haynes King pick, too, at quarterback. He's able to be mobile. He'll do some things that Kellen really couldn't, in my opinion. I wasn't very high on Kellen Mond. But, look, Jimbo has built that thing from the inside out. I know they lost some offensive linemen to the NFL, but they returned and they've recruited so well. I mean, Featherly's a guy that's came in and looked really good. Jameer Johnson they get from the transfer portal starting at left tackle. Green's going to start at right tackle. He's going to be a top 10 pick. And their best players, DeMarvin Leal, a defensive lineman, is probably going to be a top 5 pick. And you look around, their front seven is scary as hell on defense. Their offensive line and tight ends are unbelievable. Weidemeyer and Cup may be the best 1-2 tight end combination in the country. And they're not going to have their receiver room all beat up this year. A lot of people didn't realize last year Damian Craig, the wide receivers coach, was having to work with a bunch of guys that were hurt. I mean, he had guys tearing his ACL, scoring touchdowns against Florida. It was just one of those years. So I think A&M is a big problem for the next 5 years. And longer. They have the ability to, the resources to, the facilities to, the money to. So A&M to me is on the cusp of starting to teeter into elite territory, and I think you'll see it on the field here in the next 4 or 5 years.
That's awesome, man. Any other sleepers in the SEC you see coming out?
Kentucky. I got them finishing second in the West. I don't believe in Florida this year. I just love what Mark Stoops has done. And, that team, talk about up front again. I know I talk about it all the time. They look like an SEC team up front. And somebody told him that you could throw forward passes now.
Man, well, Jake, we appreciate your time, my man. This was a lot of fun. College football season starting on Saturday, man. All is right in the world, it feels like, to say the least. Buddy, let's try to do this again. Hope you had an awesome time.
Dude, I did, Will. You do a heck of a job, man. Shout out to all the Bruin fans out there. Y'all go to the game, have some fun, and college football's back. Let's enjoy it.
Bible, we have a very awesome schedule of guests today. I'm lucky to be joined by the founder of the LA Football Network, Mr. Ryan Dyrud, and one of our beat writers for the Bruins, Jamal Madni. If you remember, he's a recurring guest now. This is his second time on the show, so this will be a fun episode. Gentlemen, we have finally reached maybe the most anticipated UCLA game in quite some time. They are playing the LSU Tigers, hosting them at the Rose Bowl this Saturday. Lots of storylines to get into to begin this season. But we got to follow up with last week. UCLA had such an impressive opening week victory. Ryan, the defense looked sharp. I mean, they held Hawaii under 30 yards rushing all day. Were wreaking havoc against that offensive line, the quarterback. What was the most impressive thing you saw from the defense for UCLA last week?
Yeah, Will, good to be back on. Thanks for having me. But real quick, you mentioned the most anticipated game, and the reason why that is because if you remember 2 and 3 years ago, they hosted Oklahoma at the Rose Bowl. And so that was highly anticipated, but UCLA just wasn't good. And now UCLA looks like maybe they'll be actually competitive in this game. So I think that's why there's so much more excitement. Whereas in those years, it was like, wow, we're just going to witness another blowout. And hopefully we won't, because I think they look a lot better. And that goes into what we saw last week. And we saw the defense. I think what was most exciting is not the statistics, not the holding them to this many points because they are lesser competition, but it was the way and the style they play. Just a fast, in-your-face, smash-mouth defense. And I talked with someone earlier. I can't remember if it was with you or someone a few weeks prior, but what we wanted to see with this defense was to be like an offensive defense, like not just playing to lose the game, but playing to win the game in a sense where they take over the game and put it in their hands. And we saw that last week. It was Tukney to win. She was from the LA Times. I was talking to her and how they held on by a thread all year last year. And in this week one, we saw them kind of step on the throat of Hawaii and take over. So for me, that's what was most exciting, was seeing them really, truly evolve as a defense and become that offensive defense, if you will.
Yeah, Jerry Azzinaro got a lot of flack for being re-signed over a year ago. And boy, I mean, granted it was Hawaii, but that is the best the defense has looked under a Chip Kelly coach team since he has been here. And there's reason to be excited. 7 guys blitzing at the same time. Boy, Ale Cahow, the Alabama transfer, sack, blocked punt that was eventually returned for a touchdown for UCLA. The amount of pressure, I mean, you could count on like one finger just how much time this guy had as a quarterback. Chevin Guerdo, I think his name was, for Hawaii. 1, 2, 3 seconds. This guy had to get rid of the ball quickly because people were just in the backfield. Jamal, defense looked great. Let's talk about Zach Charbonnet. What a debut from the Michigan transfer. 17.7 yards a carry, touchdown runs of 21, 47, and 21 for 3 touchdowns total. Give me your assessment on Charbonnet and how the running game is looking.
Well, it was an absolutely spectacular debut. I mean, 6 carries, 3 touchdowns. The guy potentially has the ability to make more of an economic impact than Bitcoin, because he may as well save Chip's job and cost Harbaugh his with that performance. But he gave, I think, Bruin fans a taste of a little bit of everything. You mentioned the 3 touchdowns. The first touchdown was just, demonstrating an incredible burst of speed, right down the right side of the line. The second touchdown, he was running over Hawaii secondary members who were trying to go high and give him arm tackles, and he just sort of trucked them off the line. And then the third was just beautiful patience and vision and a couple jump cuts there and following his blockers. So the guy seems like he's got the total package. And when you couple him with Britton Brown, who, didn't do too much and didn't need to do too much, just took what the defense gave him and still had a really solid game on 78 yards on 13 carries. Yeah, that's really going to be the bread and butter of the team. And I think they've got 2 really great anchors to give a run-first identity there. So lots to be excited about.
Brown and Charbonnet looked electric. And I want to pose this question to both of you guys real quick. Over-under, is this a top 10 rushing offense in the country when you combine? We didn't even get to see DTR's running ability really in the first game. I mean, this is, coupled with a Chip Kelly run offense, 5 returning offensive linemen. We saw what Charbonnet was able to do. I'm pretty confident with him moving forward. We've seen what Brown can do. Brown is a very solid running back, averaged over 6 yards a carry last game. Is this a top 10 rushing offense in the country? Because I say it is. We'll start with you, Ryan.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think they absolutely can be. And the most important factor in that, besides the great running backs, is that this potentially can be the best offensive line in the Pac-12. Returning so many guys. Sean Ryan, a potential high-end draft pick in the NFL, bookended with some other, another tackle, another great guys in the interior, all returning. Like, these guys have played together basically since their freshman year. So there's a lot of camaraderie and known ability there. So I think they absolutely can be a top 10 unit. And if you're trying to keep the ball out of DTR's hands to maybe not force any turnovers, you want to run the ball 40 plus times a game. And with these backs and this offensive line, you can certainly do that. And that would put them in, I think, the top 10.
How about you, Jamal? What do you think?
No, I completely agree with Ryan. I think the potential is all there. And what's interesting is the word that kind of comes to mind with UCLA in the trenches on both sides of the ball is nasty. And that's not really a word that's very synonymous with UCLA football very often. There was a year or two there in the Mora years where you could tell they were a physical team. This really has the makings of all of that and then some. And so I think part of their success to get into the top 10 is going to be the defense itself and being able to kind of play games in a way where we can continue to be run first and not have to sort of air it out. But it's all there. It's all there to be top 10 for sure.
Well, I mean, the game has finally descended upon us. LSU UCLA tomorrow in primetime on Fox. I mean, this is going to be a fun game for UCLA fans all over. Guys, what are you most excited to see, on game day tomorrow night? The guy I want to start with, Ryan, is I think we need a better performance from DTR, but I do think he's capable of bringing that to the table. I mean, this is year 4 for him. We saw him kind of break out a little bit last year. Now is the time. If he wants to be an NFL draft pick, it starts with showing a little something against the LSU Tigers in the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, he knows the pressure's on, right? Like, obviously this is last year in college, and if he wants to go to the next level, he needs to perform. So you could see that, I think, in week 1, that there were some nerves there, starting off real slow, and then put together a good drive, 4 for 4, I think, right before the second half, if I'm not mistaken, or before the end of the first half. But we want to see him settle down early and, just be smart. We've seen now what this running game can be, so he doesn't have to force anything like he did in years past. He just take what the defense gave him, use his legs. I mean, that was one of the reasons why he was so highly recruited, because of what he could do in the running game and what he could add, that versatility and that dual threat QB. And we didn't see that really last week. They didn't need to. But they'll want to do that against this LSU team because, unfortunately, I would say fortunately, the matchup with this LSU, their UCLA, I think, matches up well because of their running game. Because LSU, their strength, their defense is the secondary. I mean, they have two of the best corners in the country. And so you don't want to be airing it out 40 times a game going against that secondary. You want to be running the ball between the tackles, which is what UCLA's shown is what they're good at. So if DTR allows that to happen and then uses his legs to do that, then he can kind of calmly get into a rhythm. And then hopefully if they want to air it out, then they can utilize the play action, utilize the option game, and then we'll see him start stacking these games. And hopefully by week 4, he'll be in a really good rhythm to where he can start showing off that talent that he has, that he can actually make it to the NFL level. Because I think he has the ability to. It's just all up here, all mental, above the shoulder pads. If he can put together a full, consistent 60 minutes, which we honestly have not seen one of those in his tenure with UCLA, and hopefully he can start doing that and beginning tomorrow against LSU.
I think you're totally spot on. Talent has never been an issue with this guy. I mean, just look at the throw he made week 1 to Casimir Allen for that 44-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
That was a beautiful downfield throw. It just happens that he started out the game 0 for 5, missed an easy touchdown pass to Kyle Phillips, which was rough to watch. Jamal, what are your thoughts on DTR? Do you think he could put it together for a big game like this? Time's running out here in Westwood for DTR.
No, I think Ryan said it so well. I think the key and brought up a great point that this is a game where we really need him. It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have this week. And as Ryan talked about, when you talk about Stingley Jr., you talk about Elias Ricks, the 2 LSU corners, they are going to be very physical at the point of attack with the UCLA receivers. And then when you sort of factor in LSU bringing back a defensive coordinator, Durante Jackson, from the Dave Aranda coaching tree, where LSU had a lot of success being very physical up front and then really jamming folks at the point of attack, LSU is going to look a lot more like the LSU of 2019 and 2018 and 2017 defensively than what we saw last year, which was a bit of an anomaly. I think their scheme was a little too complex for them. And so this is going to be a much simpler game plan for UCLA where they're going to have to establish the run. But the key is DTR is going to have to be precise, and he's going to have to find Dulcich. I think the windows are going to be a little bit more narrow than they normally are. And so his footwork, planting the feet, following through, and really kind of taking what the defense gives him, I think is really going to be key. And as Ryan said, it's really all mental. Don't necessarily need the spectacular play. You just need the solid play. And I think if he can string together the solid plays, then the confidence comes. And then when there's an opening, he has the ability to be explosive and be spectacular, but you don't need to start the game with that mindset.
I totally agree, man. And, you mentioned the 2 corners, Elias Ricks, Derek Stingley Jr. He has been rated as the number 1 corner since he was like a freshman at LSU in 2019. We knew this guy was going to the league like the second he stepped on a college football league or field, and it wasn't even close. You get some crazy stats from last year. LSU is actually coming off one of their worst years in the new century. I mean, they were 5-5 last year. They had the 124th ranked total defense in college football. LSU is usually one of the top 15, 20 defenses in the entire country every single year. Bo Pelini could not have done a worse job as a defensive coordinator. You mentioned they got the new D coordinator in there. He's formerly the Minnesota Vikings defensive backs coach. Hopefully they turn it around, just not against us. That's kind of
tomorrow.
my thing.
Yeah.
Not tomorrow. For the sake of, Orgeron's job. But, gentlemen, we got to pick one breakout player for this next game. Who's going to bring UCLA a big-time game that we're not expecting it? Ryan, I'm going to start with you, man. Who are you going with?
Oh, man. I can go with the obvious one in Dulcich just because we know how good he can be in, a one-catch performance. But I'll go with one of the receivers because I really believe, in both of them. But I'll go with Kyle Phillips. He had that, you mentioned it, the missed, not his fault, but the overthrow from DTR. I'm sure they talked about that in practice and was like, hey, guy, I got to get the highlight reel too. Get me on the stat sheet as well. So I just love Kyle Phillips. I love his game, what he brings to this team. And so, I think he's going to have a little breakout performance for this year. Obviously, he's been good his whole career here, but breakout for this season, and then hopefully they'll be able to build upon that. So I'll go with Kyle Phillips.
Love Kyle Phillips, man. I'm projecting maybe a 6-catch, 70-yard performance from Phillips.
It'd be great.
Kind of dicing up some corners in the slot. What do you think about that?
He's a guy. He's a move the chains guy, right? Like he can wow you with some big plays, but he's more of that. Hey, on 3rd and 6, he's a guy running the slant route, running the comeback, the hook route. So he's a guy that's just going to move the chains and keep the ball rolling and let the UCLA Bruins offense really run through their running game. So
Bruins version of Edelman and Wes Welker. We gotta love Kyle Phillips.
there you go.
Jamal, who's your guy, man? We got a big game.
I'm gonna go Will with the Quantrez Knight. I think a lot of the conversation, tomorrow and all leading up to the week has been how does the UCLA offense match up with the LSU defense? And I think a key is going to be when you flip that around. The LSU offense on the UCLA defense, you're talking about Max Johnson, the quarterback of LSU, still relatively young. He had that big performance last year at the Swamp. It's their first game. They didn't get a tune-up game. Hurricane Ida has sort of displaced them. So this game has all the makings to be close, going well into the second half. And one of the things that I think can really tip it into UCLA's favor is the play of their secondary. And I think Quantrez Knight plays with a swagger and an aggressiveness that caught Chip Kelly's eye from day one, from that Colorado game when he transferred from Kent State. I think he's going to make a big interception, a big play that I think is going to have a huge impact on the game. I'm going to go with Trez Knight.
Yeah, and if I can jump in real quick, Will, like Jamal wrote a phenomenal article on LAFB Network that everyone needs to check out, but he just mentioned all of in this article, the transfer players that came to UCLA and Chip Kelly's system that are now making a huge impact. And I mean, it's astounding how many that they've gotten. So everyone's criticized Chip with his recruiting, but he's done well in the transfer portal, and obviously Quantrez Knight is one of those.
Quantrez Knight is a monster. And Jamal, I think we actually talked about this the last time you were on the pod. I go, they like to use him like Jamal Adams. That's what I saw at the game. He's blitzing off the edge, bringing him up, going against the run, going against the pass, trying to, get in the backfield and disrupt plays. Quantrez Knight did just that against Hawaii. If we can get that again, man, that's a special player to have. I think he's going to make some big plays. Ryan and I, we like to say we started the Greg Dulcich hype train. He's got to be a guy we're thinking about, preseason Mackey Award, guy who's on the list. It's a big player there. But the guy I really want to see break out, it's about time. This guy was a high school All-American. It's time for Chase Cota to step up and make some plays, man. Mm-hmm. Chase Cota, this is your time. We need another receiver on the opposite side of, Kyle Phillips. Casimir Allen made a big play last week. Maybe he's the guy, but I'm ready to see Cota break out. This guy came in with a ton of potential. We just haven't seen it. So Chase Cota, go out there, make some plays. Gentlemen, this is the final question I got for you. Give me your score prediction, LSU, UCLA. Ryan, I'm going to start with you, and I got a good feeling about it.
Oh, man. Yeah, I've been going back and forth on this because I really don't want to sound homerish, but after just seeing last week, and again, it's against Hawaii. I've tried to say, I said it on my show earlier when I was recording. You take it with a grain of salt, right? But what you want to take from games like that is overall, not the score, not the overall yardage, but you see things like how's the defense all attacking the football? Are they all there at the point of attack? Are they all there? How's the sideline looking? How is the offense looking in the huddle? You look at little things like what you want to see in practice. Is it translating to on the field? And then obviously hopefully that translates to the scoreboard. And we saw that all in spades, I think, last week, other than a few DTR plays, which we talked about. So I have a lot of excitement about this team. And LSU, there's so much unknown. 5-5 last year. Yeah, we could talk about this new coaching staff and the SEC, and they are LSU. Went through a horrible, obviously Hurricane Ida. They're in Pasadena since a few days ago, but, they had the practice in Texas before that and the travel and all this, come to the Rose Bowl. I know they'll have probably a lot of fans there, but I like UCLA. I really do in this game. I think they get them. It's going to be a close one. It's going to be a battle. It's going to come down to which defense can make a stop at the end. But I'm going to go with 35-31 UCLA in this one.
I love it. Let's go. We got a Bruins victory over an SEC team. That is a big one, to say the least, and a talented one as well.
Yeah. In
this LSU squad. Ryan is going with the upset. Jamal, where are you going, my man?
I mean, I love the analysis. I think it's spot on. This is going to be a game. We talked a little bit about those Oklahoma games over the last couple of years. What we can definitively say is it's not going to be that outcome. Certainly. This is going to be a battle. This is going to be a game. I see UCLA kind of taking a lead end of the first quarter, early second quarter. I think this game is going to be a one-possession game and tight all the way through. We're going to go into the second half. We're going to go early fourth quarter. I'm very excited about the possibilities. I think the game's going to swing on a handful of plays in the fourth quarter. Yeah, I'm trying not to be the homer either. I think I'm going to go LSU 23-20 in the Rose Bowl, but I think it can go either way depending on. I think keep an eye on special teams. LSU's relied a great deal on special teams on the road over the years. Great field goal kicking. We talked about the punt block with UCLA. This thing could come down to a deep punt, a blocked field goal, very much to kind of flip the field late in the game. So I'm going to go 23-20 LSU, but I can see UCLA pull this off very easily.
Yeah, and what's exciting, Will, too, is if you look at the spread, LSU is only a 2.5-point favorite. So Vegas usually knows what they're talking about. So it's going to be a close one.
It's been lowered. They've had a lot of travel issues with this hurricane. Our thoughts and prayers go out to everyone being affected by that in the bayou right now in Louisiana. But I think, I just spoke about this with Jay Crain earlier. I think I've got the same kind of thing. I think it's going to be close. I think UCLA takes the lead early. My heart is telling me UCLA, but my head is telling me LSU. I'm going 42-34. It's a close game. LSU squeaks it out. But this is not a game that's going to break the back of UCLA. It's going to be one where the country starts to take us seriously, and we're going to have a real shot and momentum riding into the Pac-12 schedule after a game like this. So 42-34, LSU beats us, but UCLA puts on a hell of a show and makes it a ball game. Gentlemen, this was a lot of fun. We have to do this again, the three of us, at some point throughout the season. College football's back, and we get NFL back the following week. Life is good.
Life's great. Can't wait. Happy it's back. Will, thanks for having us on.